Authentic Parenting is a free resource, and since 2015, support for this podcast comes from listeners like you. Your contribution helps cover the many costs associated with the production, hosting, and post-production of the show. This is an ad-free show, and donations are greatly appreciated. To make a one-time donation in any amount that you desire, or make a monthly donation, go to authenticparenting.com/support. Thank you for your generous and kind support. It means the world to me. I am Anna Seawold, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach, and on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, parenting through connection instead of coercion. I am speaking with a woman who has been such an inspiration and influence over me as a person and professional over the years. And I am thrilled to have finally had her on the show. Pam Leo is a family literacy activist, a read aloud advocate, founder of the Book Fairy Pantry Project, the author of Connection Parenting, and a new children's book, Please Read to Me. Pam has worked with children and families for more than 40 years. From her work with teen parents, parents in prison, parents in recovery, and low-income parents, she learned that all parents want very much to provide for their own children. She has never met a parent who didn't want life to be better for their children than it was for them. Her enduring love for children's books, her passion for literacy, and her commitment to empowering parents are combined in her new role as the founder of the grassroots literacy movement, the Book Fairy Pantry Project, whose mission is No Child with No Books, because books change children's lives for good. Pam Leo is a member of Kindred's International Editorial Advisory Board and a member of the board of directors for Kindred's parent nonprofit, Kindred World. In this episode, we explore the transformative concept of connection. Unlike the authoritarian and permissive models many of us grew up with, connection parenting fosters a strong, healthy bond between parent and child, recognizing this bond as crucial for our children's optimal development. We talk about why connection matters, how build and rebuild connection with our children on a daily basis, and what it looks like. We talk about respecting children. Pam shares a truly powerful exercise from her book to help you with your parenting goals and values. We talk about the importance of play, literacy, and so much more. This was such an honor to speak with Pam. And one idea that stayed with me from this conversation was the distinction between competence and self-worth. And I have been thinking about those two concepts ever since. And I have so much more to say about self-worth and competence. I understood something really significant from this conversation with Pam. This episode is truly a fantastic conversation, a must listen, and I hope you'll enjoy it and find it really helpful. Please enjoy, and thank you for listening. It is such a pleasure connecting with you, meeting with you, and having this privilege to speak with you.
I was delighted to be asked.
I should have asked years ago. Your name was on my book, in my notebook for so many years. I mean, your book has influenced me, and I am not exaggerating. It changed who I am. It shifted how I view children, how I do my work. It shaped my work. You know, your book came out in 2005 when parenting was not even an industry, quote
Yeah.
unquote. You know, you are a true pioneer. I didn't even have a child when I read your book.
Really?
Yes, my daughter was born in 2008, and your book just brought everything I knew about child development, psychology. It's so concise and well said, everything. It just shaped my philosophy and it led me to so many other books. And, you know, I was inspired even by your workshop model to create my own 8-week program. And that's
So
how I started working with parents. So you have such an influence in what I do today.
Isn't it so funny how you can just be in the world and doing what you do and you have no idea? You know, I had no idea any of this. So I'm deeply honored.
I am deeply honored that you're here and I have the opportunity to speak with you. I mean, there's so many gurus out there these days. Everybody's a parenting coach, you know, everybody's writing parenting books. And I don't feel like your book gets so much attention as it should.
I agree. I had every hope for it to be a #1 bestseller, and I was so disappointed when it wasn't. I was like, what happened? You know?
But, you know, most of other parenting people are saying the same things, like they are deriving their work from yours.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, that's progress. So that's how I have to look at it.
Yes.
The more of us in the choir, the more people we reach.
Yeah, yeah, so true. You know, and you named it at that time, connection parenting, parenting through connection instead of coercion, through love instead of fear. You know, I hadn't opened this book in so many years, obviously, but I have marked, as you can see. And when I reopened it for this interview, I'm like, wow, this is the voice in my head. This is what I say. I'm like, she said this. Is this where I learned this? So it's so incredible.
Thank you. You know, it's funny. Sometimes I'll go long periods myself without reading it. I mean, why would I read it again? You know, unless, again, if I'm doing an interview or something. And sometimes the person interviewing me is more fresh on it than I am. And they'll say, well, you said this. And I'm like, oh, did
Yeah. You know, one of your quotes, I use it a lot and it's on my website. I think it's one of the most famous and most powerful quote. Could you guess which one I'm talking about?
Let's raise children who won't have to recover from their childhood.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think it's so powerful.
Well, I mean, it really, and I tell people, don't think that because I wrote Connection Parenting that my children don't have to recover from their childhood, because this was a journey that I started when they were born and I gathered pieces along the way. So I knew things when they were 17, I didn't know when they were 2. So they still will have work to do, as you know, as do I. It's funny because last night I just discovered this woman, she's called the Crappy Childhood Fairy.
Yes, she's on YouTube, right?
Yeah, I had never come across her work before and I loved it. So I posted her thing and I said, for those of us who do have to recover, support for those of us who do have to recover from our childhood. Yeah, she's got some really great stuff. I was really happy to see that that's out there.
Yeah, yeah, there's so much out there. I want to ask you, like, you inspired me, your book. Books are obviously very powerful in that way, and you are such a literacy advocate yourself. What books inspired you or shaped you the way your book has impacted me?
Well, many, really many. I usually tell people that I graduated from the University of Bibliography because every book I read led me to reading another book. So, as best I could, I tried to capture that at the end of each chapter and just say, these are the books that influenced the thinking that went into this class. And definitely Joseph Chilton Pierce's book, Magical Child, was very key for me because I'd been teaching parents for a long time. We need to meet children's emotional needs, but I wasn't telling them why. And it was when I read that book that I made the connection about connection, that when we meet their emotional needs, we make connection, which is what they need. So, it's sort of back and forth. But that was a big one. The very first one I ever read was How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. I mean, that is a classic. And way back, Time Ganot, Between Parent and Child. And then I totally serendipitously, discovered the work of Janusz Korczak, who wrote the book When I Am Little Again. And that was so powerful for me. That's a lot of what the Respect chapter was based on. And then Patty Whiffler's work, who has since written the book Hand in Hand, way back in the day. She used to come to Maine where I live, and I did her workshops. And she used to have these little parenting booklets. And so I really tried to acknowledge that this is where I learned this. You can learn it from her too, because we all bring to it whatever our own experience is and what we already have in there. One of the really great books is Playful Parenting by Larry Cohen. And Larry and I co-presented. We're good friends, actually, now. But before we became good friends, I read his book, therefore went to his workshops. And then I always tell people, next to my own book, Larry's book, Playful Parenting, is my favorite parenting book. It's just so amazing because I was not good at playing with my own children because I don't think anyone ever played with me. So I didn't have that model. But after I took Larry's workshops and, read his book and got to really know his material, I was great at playing with my grandchildren. So they benefited from that, because mine were already grown when I discovered that information again. Another book that was incredibly helpful to me was The Explosive Child by Ross Greene and Raising Your Spirited Child. So it really was my second child that kind of spurred my journey on. With my first child, I thought, I want a different model of how to be a parent than what I experienced. And so I started reading. But then 7 years later, when my second child was born, a completely different personality and a way bigger challenge. Then I really dug in, and Raising Your Spirited Child was incredibly helpful, as was The Explosive Child. What else? Oh, nonviolent communication definitely was huge on the communication chapter. And so I was teaching it as a 6-week series for a long time before I added that 7th week. And I added it because the feedback I was getting from parents was, this is too hard, Pam. I can't do this. This is too hard. This is asking too much. And I thought, why are they saying that? Because it's simple, but not easy. It's simple, straightforward, but not easy to accomplish. And I thought, because they're trying to do it alone. And parenting never used to be, never was intended to be a 1 or 2 person job. And so I added that 7th class, The Needs of Parents. The whole, takes a village, put on your own oxygen mask first, all that stuff. Parents needed to hear that. So then it becomes possible to, go in that direction. And I love one of the quotes that I used in my book was by Scott Noel. And he said, we will always be parenting in the gap between the parenting we aspire to and what we're able to do in the here and now. And for me, that is so much grace. Like I have never met a parent, never. And I have done classes with incarcerated parents, parents in rehab, teen parents, parents really in every kind of circumstance. And I have never met a parent who woke up in the morning and said, well, what could I do today to really mess up my kids? It's not how it works. Every day we think, we're just going to do everything we can. And every parent I've ever met also has wanted life to be better for their children than it was for them. And I've actually had classes at the prison that had a father and son in the same class. They were both incarcerated. And part of what we do in that first class is what I call our mini biography. And, we just tell the story. What was our story? Knowing that we can take neither credit nor blame for what our story was. It's just what we got. And, that was just kind of chilling, to have a father and son in a class with me that were both incarcerated and thinking about their children, the son's children. And the program that I was doing, it was part of a larger program where the parents, if they did the parenting class, got to have these monthly visits with their children that were better than how they just come to the prison and be in the cafeteria and there's no toys and no books and nothing. These were special visits where we brought in books and, really created a nurturing environment for that couple of hours for them to be in. And yeah, it's really a powerful experience. I learned so much. I was there for 18 years and they taught me so much, so much.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. I knew about that part of your life, but I didn't know it was such an extensive period.
Yeah. Oh, also, I was at the Center for Grieving Children for 18 years, that pretty much the same 18 years, training facilitators, group facilitators with the Healing the Feeling Child information. And they still use it, even though I'm not still there, they still use it. And so that was an important learning experience as well. So I really have been privileged. And because I did family childcare for children ages 2 through 10 for 22 years, I mean, it was like having a living laboratory, because I was such a voracious reader. I would read at night and on the weekends. And then I had these children that I was with every day so that I could say, well, is this true or is this not true? It was this kind of a dynamic combination, really.
That's wonderful. Well, I can comment on so many things and take this to so many directions, but I love how you highlighted Scott Noel's quote. I do have it in my notes. I was going to mention that because it's so true, right? And we don't want to be hard on ourselves and beat ourselves up. We do want to aspire to be great parents, but there is also the current moment. This is who we are, how we parent now. We always parent in the gap. I just love that quote. It just captures parenting so much. And grace and self-compassion, I think like it's the biggest tool that any parent can cultivate. Of course, we're going to mess up, make mistakes, not be perfect. And yes, our children, even though your quote says, let's raise children who won't have to recover from their childhood. It's an aspirational quote, but it's also a real one because it speaks to the non-coercive, non-punitive parenting. But it doesn't guarantee that don't have to do their work, I love that quote so much for that reason. It just orients you.
Yeah, it's kind of like a North Star. Like, this is where we're aiming to go. We may not make it 100%. And one of my quotes that I love is that the more often that we are able to parent through connection instead of coercion, the better our children will be able to weather the times when we can't, when we're just, not having a good day or, whatever, our buttons get pushed. Oh, that's the other book I wanted to mention. Bonnie Harris's book, When Your Kids Push Your Buttons. Fabulous book.
Yeah, that's I should have Bonnie Harris on my podcast because I was on some initiative last year, End Punishment in America, and she was there too. She was part of that program. And I had forgotten about her book, but I have read all the books that you mentioned in your book. That's how I have gotten to all of those sources, which is fantastic.
And that was my hope, that was my hope, but I'm sure not a lot of people did it. And, one of the things that I love most about my book is because I had worked so long in doing once a week at prison, the illiteracy rate in prisons is between 60 and 70%. It may be even higher now. So I wanted to make sure that my book was accessible to parents of all levels of literacy. So I don't remember how I did it. It was back when I did it on a desktop computer, but I had some kind of today it would probably be called an app, but some kind of program where if I used a word that was above 7th grade level, it would flag it and I could replace it with one that wasn't. And so it was very intentional. And that's also why I recorded it as an audio book, which I'd give anything to go back and do over again because I'm way better at reading aloud now than I was, 19 years ago. Yeah. So, but that was the motivation behind it, was to make it as accessible to parents as possible.
Yeah, it is accessible. And I didn't know that. And you should record the audio book again because next year is going to be the 20th anniversary. I think
that's a great idea. I may do that. And it's about to be recorded in Spanish. It has come out in Spanish. And my friend Alejandra, who translated it, is going to read it. So there will be an audio book of it in Spanish as well, because what I thought it was going to be so fabulous for it to come out in Spanish. But what I've learned since then is that many of the parents who really need this information also don't read in Spanish either. It's not just that they couldn't read my book in English, they can't read it in Spanish either. So for them to have the audio book would be so empowering for them and could reach so many people. That's on the horizon.
That's very thoughtful. So let's talk about connection. Connection is an important part of connection parenting and parenting in general. But connection is not a given thing, right? We can develop, we can cultivate, we can deepen, we can improve. And connection, comes with disconnection, reconnection. I want you to talk about what people misunderstand about connection.
I know what you're leading toward. Yes. So one of the things before I address that, I just want to say we used to live in a way where connection was it just happened by how we lived. Babies were born at home. They were breastfed. They, stayed with the family. I mean, it wasn't that they knew about connection. It was just how we lived. But we don't live that way anymore. So it has to be intentional. And so, unfortunately, I know in another interview I did recently, she said, if you had to put a label on this kind of parenting, what would it be? And I said, relationship parenting, because that is really what it's about. And Tracy Gillette, I love her work, and we've done interviews. And recently, one of the things I'm good at is extracting the gold. Like someone might write a whole page and I'll read it and I can pull out the sentence that's pure gold. And I do that with her work a lot too. And it was even a partial sentence that I put up as a mean quote, but it was that our relationship is the only influence we have with our children. I mean, that's paraphrasing, but that's the gist of it. And so I think sometimes parents confuse connection parenting, what they consider. I mean, there's all kinds of words that are being used now, gentle parenting, just so many ways. And so they see it as permissive. That's the word I was looking for. And in my book, I say there's two kinds of parenting, that we've known before connection parenting. And it was, authoritarian parenting, which is the power of that is the child's fear of losing the parent's love. And then there was permissive parenting, which is actually the parent's fear of losing the child's love, which could never happen. Children continue to love their parents regardless of how they're treated because they're their parents. So I think that sometimes connection parenting gets put in that category of permissive. And it's really not about permissive as it is about respect. And I jokingly say about the Irma Bombeck piece of if we talk to our dinner guests the way we talk to our children, and people break up laughing like how preposterous that would be. But why would we give our children, our beloveds, any less respect than we would a dinner guest? But why would we do that? Because that's what we recorded, We recorded every word we ever heard. And when our buttons get pushed, that's what plays. And so I always say that connection parenting is not possible without, it was the 3 R's, rewind, repair, replay, but I've added reconnect to that. And I always say you can tell if you've created a disconnect with a child because they will do one or all three of these things. They won't look at you, they won't talk to you, and they don't want you to touch them. And you can tell when you've reconnected because they will look at you, they will talk to you, and they will welcome your touch. And it occurred to me that dancing includes all of those. So if you want to really know if you've reconnected with your child, if they will dance with you, you have. And I just love that. Well, I love dance anyway, but it's just such a sweet way to know, yes, we're back in connection. And the hurts that children carry, if they're not allowed to release those hurts, they block that channel for connection. And so that's where we need to know that we need to listen and that tantrums are just spillover. It's just build up and build up and build up of hurts until there's no more room. So it spills over into a tantrum. It's not bad behavior. It's healing behavior, actually. And we all have had that experience where a child just completely melts down. And then it's like the rainbow after the storm. Everything is wonderful because they're not carrying that heavy weight of all those hurts anymore. And they can just be themselves. And children are just naturally joyful. And, when they're not being hurt and when they're being respected and their needs are being met.
Yeah. And this connection is such a big part of human relationships, including parenting. And I think we need to normalize that. I feel like parents expect that their children always listen and respond and be connected to them. And if they aren't, they feel like it's their fault. But so many things get in the way of, causing that disconnect. A child could have an issue, a stressor, or, a phone might be a disconnection. Like there's other reasons. It's not always us parents causing the disconnect. But we can always repair and reconnect. I feel like the responsibility for that lies on us, not on the kid, right?
Right. So even if we didn't cause the disconnect, if they won't look at us, talk to us, or welcome our touch, they have something going on, even if it doesn't have to do with us. And it is our job as the adult with, to say, this is not like you. And in fact, I can give you a perfect example of that. I had this little girl in my childcare who was just a total sweetheart. She was just happy, just a delightful little girl. And she came home from kindergarten one day. And at that time, kindergarten was a half-day program. But what that involved was her parents would drop her off to me. I would walk her to the bus. She would get on the bus, go to kindergarten, get back on the bus, be delivered back to me. That's a lot of transitions for a 5-year-old in a very short amount of time. And she came in and I don't know, one of the kids said something to her and she just stiff-armed them, which was completely out of character for her. And I said, that is so not like you. Can you tell me what's hurting you that made you hurt your friend? And she just burst into tears and proceeded to tell this tale of woe of, it wasn't her turn for this and somebody did that. And so it had built up because school didn't feel like a safe place to have those feelings. So by the time she got back to her safe place, it just all came pouring out. And so if I had treated her like a discipline problem, like we do not push our friends, you go sit in time out, the typical coercive way of responding to a situation like that, I would have only increased her hurt. I wouldn't have, but by, just saying, oh, come here and, tell me all about it, just let her cry and hold her. And then she was her sweet self again, because she wasn't weighed down by all that grief.
Yeah. So true. So true. I mean, like learning to see beyond their behavior and not take it personally. I mean, of course, it requires that we be patient and calm and ready in that moment too. But I feel like, in so many moments during the day, we amplify, like we react because we are programmed to say, don't talk to me like that. Like so many times parents tell me, yesterday, one parent tells me, my daughter was giving me an attitude. I'm like, oh, I hate this language even. She was giving me an attitude. And like, if you see it that way and you treat it as this is an attitude, let's like pluck this and deal with this, then you're missing the child. Then you're coming from disconnection, creating more disconnection. And like, you have to repair even. The repair has to be so much harder later, right? If we can just like do the switch from the beginning when we approach the situation, and it makes a big difference.
Well, like what you said about my book for you, I mean, the intention is for it to create a radical mind shift of not seeing children as misbehaving, of seeing all behavior as a form of communication, which it is. It's telling us something and doing our best to figure out what is it telling us. That's a complete shift in like, well, we're just going to nip that behavior in the bud right now. We'll have none of that attitude, all that direction. Whoa, it's just, it's like 180-degree shift, and seeing that child as a loving, beautiful being. And, one of the things that I talk about when children have too many transitions is that you wouldn't put a seedling in the garden and then every day say, no, I think I'll put it over here and keep replanting it. I mean, not going to thrive for sure. And so, really, I think early childhood needs to be a child's greenhouse, that we need to just love them and help them be strong, because at some point they are going to be out in the world where we can't protect them. And we want to send them out there very strong, not that they need to learn right now. It's a cold, cruel world out there, and I'm going to be the one to teach it to you.
That does not inoculate, regardless of what you may think. That's the opposite, in fact.
It's the opposite, yes, from the greenhouse.
That's the opposite. You said something I want to comment on. I just had this realization. When we approach a child who, quote unquote, is misbehaving, let's say, giving us an attitude or tantruming or something like that, and we see that as a misbehavior, and when we treat that as misbehavior, don't talk to me like that, go to your room kind of approach, we also disconnect from ourselves, from our goals, from our values, from our parenting ideals and principles. we may vow to parent differently. The moment we step into that, we disconnect from that too. And that also comes with a heavy tax, I feel like. Then we feel guilty and regretful and remorseful. Like, that's not a good place to be.
It's not a good place to parent from either, because yeah, we lose all our influence and our, they're looking to us for strength. So we need to be able to do our best to parent from that place. And we're not always going to do it, but that's why we have rewind, repair, replay, and the more often we can do that and model that, then children know they can do that as well. They might say to their sibling, oh, I just grabbed that toy out of your hand. I know better than that. Let's have a do-over and let's negotiate. They can learn those skills. I've heard 3-year-olds talk that way, because they've seen their parents model that and heard their parents model that. And that's, such a huge part of how we teach is by modeling. And, if we can just remember that. So, and it's like when I can't stand it when people will say, because I give out books all the time, and parents inevitably, in their effort to teach their children manners and be gracious, will say, what do you say? What do you say? And it's embarrassing for the child. And I'll say things like, oh, she said thank you with her smile. She said thank you with her eyes. And, try to get the child off the hook of being prompted to say that. And that's not how we teach manners. The way we do it is to say, oh, thank you for giving my child a book. All that needs to be said. I've been thanked, and they see that. And eventually they will pick it up and know they need to do that. But the constant prompting, to me, feels disrespectful. If someone said that to me, what do you say? I would feel disrespected. Like, I can figure this out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Respect is important. I mean, love is love, but respect is important. And having worked with parents for like so many years, I know many people confuse respect with fear. And I feel like people have misconceptions about respect. So I want to, that's a perfect example that you illustrated. What else can you say about respect?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think it's one of our biggest challenges, because most of us were not raised being treated with respect by adults, no matter where it was, our parents, at school, anywhere. I mean, children have always been treated like second-class citizens, and just, what they think, what they feel, it really doesn't matter. And so that's part of that huge mind shift that has to happen if we're going to parent through connection. It has to matter to us that we're being respectful. And those are the places we'll probably most often have to rewind, repair, replay is, say, oh, what I just said to you was not respectful. And a wonderful tool for doing that is nonviolent communication, because the focus of that is power with the child instead of power over the child or any person. And the model we all grew up with was power over. And so it's a big shift to move into power with. So an example that I give sometimes is you have to get to the bank before it closes, and your child is happily playing and they don't want to get in the car and go to the bank. So you have a conflict of needs. And I always say the only conflict that exists between parents and children is conflict of needs. And if we had enough resource, there wouldn't be conflict of needs. So how do we be respectful of that child instead of just saying, get in the car now, to say, I know you really are happy playing right here, and that's what you need to do. And I really need to do this. So let's talk about a compromise. Can you bring that toy in the car with us? Or let me see if I can get someone to, the compromise can come from both sides. Let me see if I can get someone to come and stay with you so I can go do this errand. And the child may say, no, I want to go with you. And, it just shifts everything. So, but being willing to see their right to play is every bit as important as our right to go, or their need to play is our need to go to the bank or the grocery or whatever is happening. That's just such a shift to see them as our equals. That there's no power over, and just that we're equals. I mean, and we're not equal in experience and, all of those things. They don't have all the information we have. They don't have the maturity we have. They don't have the brain function that we have. But in terms of respect, they are equal, and they deserve equal respect for their feelings, and maybe even more so if you really think about it, because they don't have the regulation and the maturity and all of those things. So we need to even be more considering where they're at developmentally when in these situations with them where it feels like they're being unreasonable or giving us attitude.
I know. I once posted on social media that child's first bully often is the parent. And I mean, if we can change that bullying type of parenting and just instill the respect and the connection, I mean, we can change the world. Right? It's the pride, like it's the tagline of my podcast, but it took me years to understand that connection, like really in an embodied way.
One of the quotes in my book is, "We will never stop bullying until we stop bullying children."
Oh, so true. I mean, look at the wars, look at all those things that are happening, that power over mindset, mentality. Yeah, it is important. You have an exercise in the beginning of your book, which we love. And the book has practical exercises. You even ask the parent to get a journal and to accompany the reading of the book and keep all the exercises in one place. About the goals, I'm wondering if you would share that exercise, creating the two lists, the good list and the bad list.
Sure. Actually, that came out and would do that in the class. And that exercise got created in a class I was doing with moms in rehab. And so what I asked them to do is to put a line down the middle of the paper, and on the left-hand side, make a list of everything they want for their children, all the good stuff, everything they would love for their children to have. And then on the right-hand side, make a list of all the things they do not want to have happen to their children, the don't want list. And then once they've done that, I ask them, because this is going to become our parenting roadmap and inventory, it's kind of an inventory that we're taking. I ask them to put a check mark next to everything on the do want list that they themselves got as a child. So they put those check marks, and then to go to the right-hand list of all the things they don't want and check mark everything they got as a child. And you can sort of hear the murmur in the room. Mostly, there are far more check marks on the right-hand side on the don't want list than there are on the left list. So everything on the left list that is not check marked will be a parenting challenge because they didn't have an experience of that. They didn't have a model of that. So that will go on their list of parenting challenges. Everything on the right-hand list of the things they don't want that they did check mark, they need to add to the list of their parenting challenges because it's always a challenge not to pass on what we got. And so then there they have it, their own personalized list of these are the things I want to learn how to do, and these are the things I want to learn how not to do. So it's but it starts us right out from the beginning with a direction of how to use the rest of the tools in the rest of the book. How will we meet these needs? So like in the self-esteem, and we talk about special time. That's huge. So many of the things on the do want list have to do with spending special one-on-one time with a child completely. So yeah, I love that exercise. And I was thrilled when it got created. Like I said, it was kind of organic. It just grew out of that class. And then I just started using it always because it was so powerful to be able to really look at. And like I said, and again, recognizing that we have no control over what we got. It's just what we got, and it's not because we were good or bad and also to realize that in the same way that we are doing the best we can every day, so are our parents. So if what we got was harsh, it's been my experience that every parent softens what they got for the next generation. So if what we got was harsh, we can only imagine what they got because they softened it for us. So, it gives us some compassion for our parents, and it's not about making them bad and wrong, but having a realistic picture of that did not nurture me, that did not meet my needs, and that was hurtful or, whatever it was. And having them remember, like, your parents were doing the best they could as well, for sure. That's big.
Can you say that again? What they received, they softened it for us? How did you say that? That was
whatever our parents got for treatment, however coercive or violent or even punishment, however, what that was, they made some effort without any parenting education or anything to not do that to us. But it was really hard because that was their model and that's what they recorded. But they tried, and I mean, I just know that to be true because I've listened to so many years of parents telling their, we call it the mini biography of, my parents were divorced, or my dad died when I was 4, or, whatever, my mom was in rehab, or, whatever the story was, they just tell, the brief outline of the sketch. This was what my childhood looked like. It doesn't need to be in detail. But when you hear enough of those stories, you start to realize that, whoa. So, and then they talk about their own parenting challenges. And that's where the challenges come in, is to not pass that on, not make that go forward. And I think that's what we're all trying to do, because passing on the good stuff is easy, and even for parents who most of what they got wasn't good, but there will be a grandparent or someone who was their champion, who gave them reason to believe they were worthwhile and deserved love. One of my quotes that I love is that every child needs someone who thinks the sun rises and sets on them and has an irrational commitment to their well-being. Not every child gets that, and they might get a tiny dose of it. And for some child, it might be their teacher at school. It might even be a foster parent. It could be a librarian. There are just people in our community that have that gift for seeing the best in children and nurturing that. And I mean, ideally it's their family, but it won't always be.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like most of our problems, psychological problems, relational problems, parenting problems, derive from that, for not having been seen as a worthwhile creature, worthwhile human being. It doesn't matter if you received presents, went on vacations, or you had anything. I think that's the source of most of our problems. And I feel like whoever has had it worse in that aspect, in terms of self-worth and shame and worthiness, and they have the hardest time living their life. And whoever received it just a little bit from, crumbs or leftovers from their parents or mentors or from somewhere else, they're doing fine in life. I feel like that's the determining factor for so many people. I think that's the root of our problems. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that I love in connection parenting too is the distinction between self-worth and self-esteem, because we often use those words interchangeably as if they mean the same thing, and they don't mean the same thing at all. So for me personally, I felt like I have pretty high self-esteem, because self-esteem is based on your feeling about your own competence. And I was the oldest daughter. I was parenting by the time I was 7, and I'm very capable. And I always was very capable. And my mom always expected me to be very capable. So, in terms of self-esteem, I feel like I can do pretty much anything I take on. In terms of self-worth, completely the opposite. I would always say self-esteem up here, self-worth down here, because self-worth comes from feeling cherished and treasured and loved and those sorts of things. And there was not a lot of that in my childhood. So it's hard for me to believe I'm worthy of love. And so that becomes a lifelong handicap, really, that you're just always working on. And no one once is sort of like, as a child, people can give you self-worth, but as an adult, you can't, because no one, when you're an adult, loves you unconditionally. We might like to think they do, but they don't. That unconditional love really only happens in childhood. As adults, I mean, people are going to love us if we meet their needs, if our behavior is acceptable to all of that. So when we miss that opportunity for unconditional love, it's a really hard climb to, it doesn't matter if you've written books. It doesn't matter. It's still that core belief inside of you that I'm not worthy. So that's really the most incredibly powerful gift we have to give to children, is to know their own worth. And we do that by respecting them, by giving them that one-on-one time and cherishing them. That's where it comes from. And on the other hand, too, there are children who grow up in families where they're not allowed to do anything, and they're really treasured. So they have really high self-worth. Like, I deserve everything. but not so confident about their abilities in the world because they weren't allowed to experience things and fall and fail. And, those are the kinds of things. I remember this one time, this was so powerful for me. I was with my granddaughter, she was 5, and I had taken her to a homeschooling, meetup group, and they had built a new tree house. And she wanted to get up there in the worst way. And she wanted me to put her up there. And I said, no, I can't do that. You have to get up there yourself so you will know how to get down yourself. And she was really scared. And I said, I will stand here right close by you and I can catch you if you lose your footing, but you got to get yourself up there. And I mean, she got up there and she was so proud of herself and felt so confident. And I was so glad, but I don't think I'd have thought to do that with my own children. It's just that I had grown and learned. And so by the time my grandchildren came along, I knew to do that. But I don't know that I would have thought to do that with my own children.
Yeah, I mean, self-worth, children develop it when we give it to them, when we see them, when we hear them, when we respect them, right? All of those wonderful things. But you're right, self-confidence, you develop it yourself. It doesn't come from your parents as much as you sort of, develop it yourself. This is so wonderful what you're talking about. And that example is a perfect example with your granddaughter because you communicated that I am here, I believe in you, my trust, I'm stable, all of those good things. That self-worth, right? You trusted her and that you are there and you're encouraging her. And yeah, as a result, she developed that self-esteem, self-confidence. I love this part of this conversation. But what do you think about, there's a lot of talk about parenting ourselves, reparenting ourselves. I don't resonate with those words, but I like the idea of it. You didn't get that self-worth. And like you said, and I agree with you, it's hard to get as an adult. No one is going to love you the way your parents loved you and how about giving it to yourself, developing that self-acceptance, self-love, self-compassion? What do you have to say on that front? How have you worked on that? Or I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Okay. Well, I'm still working on it. Probably will till my last day. I mean, it can be small things. I tend to not give myself a break, and so sometimes I'll say, okay, you worked really hard all day. You've got more stuff ahead of you tonight. It's okay to spend some of the grocery money and stop and get fresh spring rolls at the Thai market. That's like a big deal for me to do that. And it's a treat. But I have to give myself permission to do that and say, you're worth that. You work hard. There's no one home to cook for you. I live by myself. So, pay the extra money and let these people cook for you. And so, little things like that. Yeah, it's mostly, tiny things. So, making the time for self-care to do things that I know are good for me. And I read a great quote recently that said, everything we want is on the other side of fear. And I was like, wow, that is so true. Because one of my handicaps, I think, is I hate making cold calls. I hate to just do that. I mean, I'm an introvert and I'm shy. And not when I'm talking about my passion, clearly, but, we're one-on-one. Put me in a party setting or a group setting and I'm just quiet. And I usually don't speak up because, it's just fear of not being accepted or not being good enough. All of those things. And whenever I can push myself to step outside of that, it's always good. It is. And sometimes it isn't, but I've learned I can weather it. Everyone doesn't have to love me, And I think when you grow up as a child being a people pleaser, because it's the only way you do get the crumbs, then that's a hard pattern to break, a really hard pattern to break. But I've been working on it. And, and this can be hard. It can be easy to let the pendulum swing too far the other way. And so, to kind of find that middle ground of not being a people pleaser, but, not going too far in the other direction either. So yeah, I think, whether we call it reparenting ourselves or whatever we name it, I think that journey to self-acceptance and there are things about me like, I'm not good at technology. I'm just not. And I have no interest in being good at technology. So I get by as best I can. I still have a flip phone and I have an iPad. I don't even have a laptop, but you know what? I get a lot of stuff done with those two tools. So that's my choice. And I'm okay with that. And people are always trying to give me a smartphone. My kids want, me to do that. And it's like, no, I don't want that. So I have kind of stood my ground about that. And I'm happy with that because it's not invading my life. They're tools that I use when I need them. They don't use me. Not to say I can't get down a rabbit hole of Googling any topic until I've read 10 articles on it. I do that frequently. But yeah, so finding those ways, I guess, to just really accept yourself and forgive yourself for your shortcomings and applaud your gifts and your skills. So yeah, I think it will be a journey I'll continue all my days.
Yeah. When you said you use a flip phone in our communication, I'm like, oh, wow, I respect this woman more. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 73.
You're 73. And you have 3 children. How many grandchildren?
No, I have 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren and 1 great-grandson.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's fantastic. I mean, you brought all the gifts and not probably, I want to know about the healing journey through parenting and grandparenting and seeing your children parent their children and the impact of that. Like, I would love to know how that feels.
I'll tell you a funny story about that. This didn't actually happen, but in my head, it happened. We were at a family event, and the father of one of my grandchildren said something to his son, my grandson. And what went through my head, even though he wasn't, the father wasn't my son, what went through my head is how we as grandparents might think, how dare you treat my grandchildren the way I treated you? That's what happens is it gets passed on. But at the same time, I have had the opportunity to see things that I did that I felt proud of get passed on. Like one of the things we do in our family is every summer when the monarch butterflies come, we have these pavilions that you can put the caterpillars in and you put the milkweed in for them to feed on, and they will make their chrysalis and then they hatch and you get to release them. And I did that with my children and my grandchildren. And now I see my granddaughter doing that with my great grandson. And it just feels so sweet to me to see things like that passed on. And my granddaughter, who's now 27, has taken up sewing a lot lately. And I was like, gee, I'm surprised that you're doing this. And she's like, Grandma, when I was homeschooling, you paid for me to go to Joanne Fabric and take sewing lessons. And I'm like, oh, I did, didn't I? And so to see, and like swimming lessons, and, then she became a mermaid swimmer. And, to look back and see those places where we can make a difference in a child's life carried forward. I think that's one of the sweetest parts of having grandchildren. And during the pandemic, I was kind of being my great-grandson's own Dolly Parton imagination library because they lived too far away for me to visit, and it was COVID. So I was mailing him books every month, and that kept us connected. And the next time I did see him, he ran up and hugged me, even though it had been a long time, and said, Grandma, I love the books you send to me. It was just so sweet to know that I could maintain that connection through the mail. And I mean, I always promote to grandparents that media mail is one of the best bargains going. I mean, in the US, I know there's not media, internationally. For the same price that I can mail a whole box of books to I have sort of honorary grandchildren as well as grandchildren, and I can send them a whole box of books for $5. I couldn't take them out for an ice cream for that if I was with them. And yet the impact that has, the sweetest thing was that the mother of one of my honorary grandchildren said, we came home from daycare, and this is going to make me cry. And there was a package on our steps, and her 3-year-old said, I know who that's for, and I know who it's from. It's from Grammy Pam, and it's books. That was just like, oh, what a sweet gift that she told me that story. And how much impact that we can have from a distance just through sending books to children. And, that it becomes something important and exciting. So Dolly is right on the right trail of getting books in the mail. It's just huge. It's just so big for children because what does that say? I thought of you. I cared about you. I picked these out for you. I love you. It says all those things in a box.
Yeah, so powerful and so moving. And it speaks to the connection parenting, connection, relationship. Yeah, it's so wonderful. I can't believe this hour went by so
Oh my gosh.
fast. So quickly. Yeah, I'm so honored that you said yes. All those years I was hesitant to invite you. I'm like, what if she says no? Because I don't see your name. I'm like, maybe she just is a private person. She doesn't do interviews or anything like that. And my friend Sarah McLaughlin is also, you know her.
Yeah, she's one of my dear friends.
Yes, she said, I'll introduce you to her. Don't worry. I'm like, oh, I don't know. But I'm so glad I reached out and
I'm so glad you did too. This has been so much fun because you know my book backward and forward. And I always have the best interviews with people who really know, the questions to ask. And it's been really great fun to meet you and talk with you and see how much you're giving to the world around parenting. And, there's so many of us are needed. There's just never, I talk that way about my book fairy project, that there is no shortage of gently used children's books. The shortage is in distribution. There aren't enough book fairies. And so a really cool thing that's going to happen next week, I'm going to be at an early childhood conference with 550 early childhood educators. And I'm going to give each of them a copy of Please Read to Me to read and then gift to a new baby. So in one day, I will have recruited 550 book fairies. So I'm excited for that.
yeah, I'm excited for this passion for you. Yeah, I love that. There is a quote you love quotes. I love quotes. I heard you say a quote about books and literacy, how we can change a child's life. I can't remember that quote. Maybe you do. Let's end by saying something inspirational.
Well, I think the most important thing I have to say about literacy is that the foundation of children's literacy is falling in love with books. And the way they fall in love with books is to have books and to be read to. And that needs to happen in those first 5 years, hopefully in that first year. So we're doing a new program here in Maine called We Raise Book Babies in Maine, because every time I give a parent of a baby or toddler, if I hand them a book and that baby reaches for the book and starts turning the pages, I know I've met a book baby. And I will say to the parent, oh, I see you have a book baby. And they will, without exception, will say, oh, yes, he loves their books. And we've been reading every day since they were born. And that's how we do it. Start at the beginning. And it's that, even if it's 5 minutes, one story, even if it's one story a day, it builds connection, it builds trust, and it builds literacy foundation. All three of those things for 5 minutes. It's like the win-win of parenting to get all that for 5 minutes of effort. So that's what I'm promoting. So my new website is going to be called Read Aloud Parenting. And what Read Aloud Parenting is, in brief, is just that we use reading aloud as one of the ways we bond with our children. And so that's, I secretly call it the add water and stir of parenting, because it's just that easy. You just read that story, but do it every single day. And they won't be able to help but have a foundation for literacy. And they won't be able to help but connect with you because you always connect through stories.
Yeah. The quote I'm trying to remember, I can't. It's about we can eliminate poverty through literacy.
I know.
I can't remember.
Yeah. Illiteracy is a disease of poverty. And literacy is the way out of poverty.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to remember. Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Pam. It's been so fantastic. I mean, you made my day. Like, since the day you said yes, you just made my day. And I'm so honored. My heart is bursting from gratitude. So I think for your 20th book anniversary, we're going to do something. Like, I'm so excited to promote this. And, it has to come out more again. The book has to do a re-entrance for the 20th anniversary. I mean, that's so big. That's so big.
I want to thank you, too, for encouraging me, because I am not happy with the existing audiobook. I'm such a better read aloud person now than I was 20 years ago. So much better. And I could read it was just so much better. I want to do that. I'm going to make that one of my goals. So thank you so much for, putting that out there to me to do that.
Yes, I'm going to hold you accountable.
Okay.
And yeah, I might even help you find a place to record or something. Like, I would do some work for you because I am so excited for that.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And thank you. Be well, be healthy, and we'll connect again.
For sure. Thank you very much.
That concludes today's conversation, my dear listener, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Pam Leo was a dream guest for me, and her work, as I mentioned before, has been influential on my thinking and approach to parenting. Her book is truly an accessible read, and I highly recommend it. I am curious what ideas resonated with you and what are your main takeaways from this episode. I love hearing from you. I welcome your feedback, comments, and questions. So get in touch. Send me a note to the email info@authenticparenting.com. Call the number 732-763-2576 and leave a voicemail. And for international listeners, there is a free tool on the contact page of my website. Go to authenticparenting.com/contact and send me a message. If you enjoy the podcast and find it helpful, please take a moment to rate the show on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever platform that you are listening on. Better yet, write a short review. Ratings and reviews are really helpful. They boost the visibility of the podcast. If you love the podcast and find it helpful, please consider making a donation. Your contribution is extremely important. It helps the show stay on air. Since 2015, Authentic Parenting has been a free resource and has been an ad-free resource and solely listener supported. To learn more and make a donation in any amount that you desire, go to authenticparenting.com/support. If you want to connect with your fellow listeners from around the world, join us in our Facebook group, the Authentic Parenting Community. And finally, be sure to hit that follow button to never miss a new episode. And as always, connect to the present moment, to yourself and your children. Until next week, I am Anna Seewald. Thank you so much for listening.